There we go. Excellent. Thank you, everybody. This is this is September. Good grief. September 2021 installment of the Microsoft Data Platform Continuity Virtual Group. With me this month is Taiob Ali, nicest guy in the world, Microsoft MVP, all around, just genius at this stuff, presenting an awesome session to really continue on the trend of business continuity fundamentals called Business Continuity During a Disaster. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to you. And I'd say, let's have everybody enter any questions you have in the chat window. Please, ask questions away, and we'll let Taiob answer them when he's done with the session here.
Thank you, David and Chris, for the opportunity. And I do not take this lightly, and especially the pandemic. Running a group and trying to help the community, it takes a lot of work. We are all stressed, with our whatever situation you are in, right? So I thank both Chris and David for taking up this group and trying to get it running, because as you all know, PASS is no longer here. I know Redgate is doing some, a lot of stuff for us. And because I picked up another group actually from the user groups from PASS and running that. So I know, all the logistics and work that goes behind it. And we should all appreciate what, both of them are doing for us. And also thank you, personally for giving me the opportunity. I know you have choice of getting a new speaker. So let's get to the topic. I'm not going to read this slide, but I want you to take a note on my contacts on the left side. One thing I can promise you is that, I might not know all the answer because I'm always learning. But if you ask me a question, if I do not know, I know people are smarter than me. I'll get the answer from them and I'll get back to you. And it might not be right away, but within a couple of days. So that's guaranteed, always. And as we only have 1 hour, I'll run through the slides. I have a lot of demo code. And if we cannot get to the end for any reason, I will send a link to the organizers to my GitHub repo. I haven't refreshed it. I've been making a bunch of changes over the weekend because, as you know, Azure is changes every day, and you should be able to download and run my scripts as is with some get your subscription ID and all that changed. And if you run into any issues, of course, I'll be here to answer those. So I would request you to focus on the concept, not try to, just get into the mechanics, right? If you get the concept, I'm sure you'll get the mechanics, right? And things will change, right? Maybe you come after 2-3 weeks or 2-3 months, things will change. So once you have the concept, but, a good grasp, you will be able to pick up whatever change come in future. We'll primarily be talking about Azure SQL Database. Now, when you say Azure SQL Database, there can be a few more things, right? Managed instance, hyperscale, SQL Server running on Azure VM, but I'll primarily be focusing on PaaS solution, which is platform as a service. And I'll also probably mention hyperscale here and there because, a lot of features are kind of now, intersect, right? Some things work on both, some does not. So I have a few pointers there. So this is actually a snapshot from the website where you can see the Azure Status. And this is I didn't make this up. In January 2019, there was an outage in one of the region for 16 hours, 11 minutes. So, why would you be listening to me, right? It's 11 a.m. in Boston, people are at work, it's a working day. Some of you it's 10 o'clock, right? The question I want to ask you is, if you are deploying Azure SQL Database for your production environment, supporting your business, go and ask the business owners, right? And you might call them business owner, product owner, and whatever. Can they afford to be down for 16 hours, 11 minutes? If the answer is no, this is probably a talk that you want to listen to. And I actually went to the site just over the weekend. I thought, that snapshot was from 2019. Is this still happening? So these are some of the downtime in 2020. And I filtered this just for Azure SQL Database, the product that I'll be talking about. So if you look at some of these times, so I'm not going to read this, some are pretty long, right? 9:37 to 13:54. So that's, over 4 hours of downtime, right? So again, the point I'm trying to make is do not assume that, just moving to cloud, you're always up and running, because Microsoft has so many big data centers region, and they talk about, because again, they're running hardware, and David is a expert on this. You can ask him offline, the issues that he sees all the time. So prepare for this, right? So, and for preparation, you need to know what are your options. And the goal of this talk is to talk about those options, show you a couple of things that you can take and start with that. So I'm not going to repeat this term, but if you do not know this, you want to look at, and just you thinking, what should be your RTO, RPO is not enough, right? I really want you to have some conversation, right? With your app owners, with the business counterparts. Ask them, what is their tolerance? Can they be down? How long they can be down? And the solutions that you are putting in, what is Microsoft guaranteeing you? Print out those numbers and go and tell them, hey, this is what Microsoft guarantees us. Are you okay with it? No, I'm not okay with it. Okay, then we need to do something else, which is probably going to cost you more money. And we'll see those examples. So are they, ready to write those checks? So have those discussions before you really go live. You don't want to have the discussion and, your boss, your VP or your CTO walking, behind your cube when the server is down, right? When the app is down. That's the last minute. Because if you're in agreement, then he shouldn't be, breathing on your neck, because he knows that you agreed on a 12-hour downtime if things go south. And you should have that in writing. And make sure your incident manager or whatever you call that role is in agreement with you. And I'll show you a couple of URLs from Microsoft documentation that you can take and show them, hey, if you deploy this, this is your RTO, RPO. If you deploy this, you can improve this, and which one you need. And based on that, they should write the check and you should deploy or design your solution that way. Now there's a new term floating around, is a ERT, estimated recovery time. And this is nothing other than your max ERT should be your RTO. So what's ERT? Is estimated recovery time, we just said, right? So that's the duration that you can be fully functional, right? And don't just look at your SQL Server, because your SQL Server app, you might be able to fail over from East US2 to Central US. How about your app servers, right? How about your network? How about other stuff they need for the application to fully working? So talk to your other partners, right? If you have an app support team, if your architects, talk to them, sit down, bring everyone in a room and talk about it end to end, right? And make sure all of you are on the same page, because there are solutions that I'll show you that we can fail over and very quickly. But if your other stuff is not ready, then it's no use, right? Then you are wasting your money that you are running a server in Central US, which is continuously syncing between East US2, but your app servers, if they need a 12-hour recovery time, then why you are wasting this money, right? Then you might as well just restore from a backup and spin up a new server. So just think about those things. This is, if someone is not really familiar with RPO, RTO, if you are, then probably this is not a slide for you. Just a, more of a visual that, that gives you a definition. Now, if you look at the top, the RTO, I have two colors, right? And this can be a matter of debate, right? Should this be part of RTO? Some people might say no, some people might say yes. And, if I give you an example, right? Say if you're pretty much a 9-to-5 business, like a bank in the US, if you're not doing trading, of course, if you're doing frequency trading and the stuff, you are up 24/7. But if you're like a traditional bank that people walk in, withdraw money, deposit money for a branch, you're probably a 9-to-5 shop. Now, say if you did a deployment at 7 p.m. and you did update or a delete without a proper where clause or a predicate, your data is messed up, and you might not find it till next day morning when your business opens, right? Now, your disaster happened at 7 p.m., but your request for recovery didn't happen till the next day, right? So, it's possible. Now, do you, calculate that time in your RTO? It can be a matter of debate or, case by case, but I just still want to mention that. Now, before I go into topics, this is a slide that, Microsoft Azure SQL Database comes in a two different flavor. One is they're called DTU, which was originally when Azure SQL Database was released. we only had the option of DTU, and then database transaction unit, and then the vCore came. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time. If you do not know what is DTU, it's an abstraction of your IO, your CPU memory and all that, look it up. But Microsoft recommend that we use vCore going forward. Now, if you already deployed in DTU, do you need to move everything to vCore? Probably no. If you're happy with it, keep it as is. Now, they deploy, you have all these options for your service tier, your computer and hardware type. Before you really, make an agreement with your business partners, you really want to, know about this, because some of the options I'm going to show you, everything is not available for everything that you see in this screen. Like we'll talk about zone redundancy. If you're deploying a M series VM, you will not get zone redundancy with M series, because zone redundancy is only supported by Gen 5. So if you do not know that, you deploy M series, then they want zone redundancy, then you are out of luck, right? Of course, you can always, change these things. There's a downtime involved because you get a connection error, you have to retry. So it's better to, know what offers what and make a decision based on that. This is a copy paste from a Microsoft documentation. Again, if you're new to this, give you some idea what is DTU model and what is the vCore model. Again, I'm not going to read, I put the URL there in the slide. You can go and read a little bit more if you want to know the differences. I thought it's fair because I mentioned this to give you a little bit more details if you are new into this. So when you talk about redundancy, I briefly mentioned about deployment, right? If your deployment goes wrong, we want to be redundant on that. But what other redundancy you're talking about? So Microsoft has data centers. Now in a region, you have many data centers. If it's a bigger region, you have many. If it's a small region, you have comparatively less number of data center. Now a data center can go down. So what Microsoft did is within a region, you also have this called zone. What does that mean? It means that each zone guarantee your independent power, cooling, and network. So even a data center goes down within a zone, you can be migrated to a different data center within that zone. So a region can be comprised of multiple zones. So when you think about redundancy, think about all of this, right? And decide what you want, right? Do you want just a data center redundancy, zone, region, or geography? Based on that, you have to cater your solution. And the further right you go, you're probably talking about, spending more money. So what are the things that's available to us, right? All these 6 are available. Now, some of you might be questioning that why I put temporal table here, right? Is that really a solution for HADR? Probably not. But what temporal tables gives us, because of the, for the raw versions that it keep, you can go and restore, from a point in time that, that example that I gave you, right? So if you had a 7 p.m. Deployment that didn't go as intended, you can probably go and look at some of the data that got modified pre 7 p.m. And I'm not going to do any demo on that. There's not much difference between on-premises and Azure when it comes to temporal table. But again, depending on what solution you deploy, whether you're in business critical general purpose or you are in premium tier or general, there are some stuff that you get and you don't get, especially the column store index. So look at the details if you want to know before you deploy. But we're going to talk about the other 5 that you see here. So let's move on. So before I go there, I talked about a few times about RTO, RPO, and then what kind of discussion you want to have with your counterpart. So this is a perfect example if you look at this slide. And I actually, at my workplace, I have all 3, depending on the app. I have apps that we are running in cloud. They do not want, we are in East US too. They don't want a counterpart in another region because the app can sustain. They're okay with spinning up a new server. And I'm talking about Azure SQL Server, not a traditional server that you buy and you take it to your data center. So it takes a minute or 2 and then restoring from backup. But remember, look at the RTO. it can take 12 hours to restore from a different region, right? From the backup. Now, does it take 12 hours? No. Sometimes, I did test, I can, probably get a restore going a lot faster than 12 hours. But when I go to my business partners, I don't tell them, hey, I can do it probably before that, because Microsoft is not guaranteeing me that. They're guaranteeing me 12 hours. I'm going to stick to the 12 hour, and they're okay with it. But then I have apps that said, no, I cannot do that, right? So then I come to the next one. You have a 1 hour and 5 second. No, it's not good. Okay, then go to 30 second and 5 second, and I can provide that. So you can show them that, and I put a URL at the bottom. You can get more details from there. So let's talk about automatic backup. Azure SQL Database, as soon as you deploy, backup starts. You do not have to configure any backup. Now, I put a note here, as you can see, I said, lose control of precise RPO. And the reason I say that, on an on-premises or a SQL Server running on Azure VM, I can define when I want to take transaction log backup, when I want to take differential backup or full backup, right? I can go up to hour, minute, and second. But as soon as you move to Azure SQL Database, you lose that control. That's why I want you to be aware of that. So if you have to be precise with those minutes and seconds, you really cannot do that. And this is a quote from the documentation, that the frequency of those backups, yes, they have a time period, and I'll show you that, a range, but it's not that precise up to a minute and second. It depends on your workload, and what else is going on in the Azure world too. So if you look at this, the full backups is a weekly differential is between 12 and 24 hours. Now, I do not know if I was on premises, I can say take differential backup Monday to Saturday at 7 p.m., 30 minutes, 30 seconds. I do not have that control. Transaction log between 5 to 10 minutes. Again, it's not precise. So you want to be aware of that. So how you can use this. So if you have a point in time backup set up, you don't have to set up, it's automatic. You get 7 days retention for any tier. And you can increase it up to 35 days, between 7 and 35, except you are in basic tier. So if you're in basic, you only get 7 days. You cannot get more than that. That's why, go back to that slide that I showed you, that you have many options and why you need to know that, right? If you're looking for a 35 days point in time and you deploy in basic tier, you're out of luck. So, read that. Now, for some businesses, like, I work for a financial industry, investment management firm. Some of our backups, just 35 days is not enough. If you are working healthcare and many other businesses, you probably need a little bit more than that, right? So longer term. So Azure has something called long-term retention, up to 10 years. And those backups automatically get copied to a different region. But now, if you are in a business, say like, I had experience before in my previous, many years ago when I worked at monster.com, UK government, and David probably knows this more because he consulted all over the world. They have limitations that you cannot take the data out of UK. So make sure you know that in those cases, you can turn off your backup getting copied to a different region in a different country. So make sure you were aware, but by default, it get copied to a paired region. So look at that. How do you set up your long-term retention? So you can have weekly backup, monthly backup, and yearly backup. So what's a yearly backup, right? There's really not a definition of yearly backup. So yearly backup is, you can say the 3rd week of the year, keep it for 5 years, or 16th week of the year, keep it for 10 years. That's what they mean by a yearly backup. What you can do with those? You can restore point in time. You can geo restore, like I said, you can go to a different region. You can also restore from your long-term backup. I get this question, so I just want to, this is obvious. You cannot overwrite an existing database. So you either have to rename it or you have to, you have to drop it. One thing you keep in mind, if you delete a database, or if you drop a database, you still have access to your point in time backups. If you delete a Azure SQL Server, you cannot restore from point in time anymore. They drop all your point in time. The only access you have is your long-term backup. So be careful, make sure, whoever you give access to, drop the server, make sure they know what they're doing. Also, there's something called lock, which is not the part of this talk. You can go and look. You can put locks on your Azure resources to prevent accidental delete. So you can look that up. Azure does this for you. They do test restore as per the documentation. They do DVCC check DB. They do check some. Now you might ask me, does that mean that I shouldn't do it? I'm not going to answer your question because it depends on your environment. What do you want to do? Do you rely on them to find out how frequently they do it? They will probably give you a range. If that's not what you want to do it more aggressive or more frequently, go ahead and do that. I get this question a lot. Can we restore on premises? You cannot just take the backup and restore as is. But there are other tools. There's something called Backpack. Again, not part of this talk, but there are a couple of tools that you can use. And if you want to know more detail, please let me know. I can help you out. I see in the chat there is, are there no mirroring programs to avoid losing this? So Tracy's question is, are there no mirroring programs to avoid losing this? So I'm not sure, Tracy, what you're probably alluding to. I mean, mirroring is not there anymore. Probably always on availability group. If that's what you meant, we'll get to that. So maybe hold your question. If I do not answer, then I'll come back to you. Built-in HADR. As soon as you deploy Azure SQL Database, without doing anything, you get some built-in high availability and disaster recovery. And I'll demo that, but I'll also talk about that. How does that happen? So you're looking at a basic standard or a general purpose. As soon as you deploy your Azure SQL Database, of course, your backups get copied. Your data and log file is locally redundant, right? So they do not get copied to a different region. If you have worked with failover cluster instance, this looks pretty same, right? If you look on the right side, you have other nodes, but they're all pointing to the same data and log file. And your buffer, cache, and your TempDB is attached to the VM. So what will happen if the primary replica goes down, right? There's a sequence of event on the top, you see the control ring, which will identify or which will sense that, okay, something wrong with your primary replica. They will bring up other compute or other VMs in Azure that has the capacity. Your data and log file will get disconnected and it will get connected to your new compute or to your new VM. And then, you get a new TempDB, and TempDB get recreated with anytime you recycle your SQL Server or your host, and then you're up into business. And I'll try to demo this if we have time. In my test, in basic standard general purpose, this happens pretty much every time I tested, and there is a test harness which we didn't have before, but now Microsoft has released a test harness PowerShell command. You can test it. It happens between 30 and 40 seconds. If I do it, issue the command from Boston to East US 2. And if you go to, and the redirection is built in. So you will see your connection is going to drop. Your front end is going to get an error message and it will automatically reconnect. If you're in Premium and Business Critical, the time it's a lot faster. The same thing will happen because here you see now you have 4 copies of your data and log file, right? So it doesn't have to detach and attach. One thing here is on your primary replica, on your read write, it is always syncing a second one out of the 3 synchronously. So whenever the failover needs to happen, it will fail over the one that it's that's synced synchronously, and the recovery time is extremely fast. In my test, it's probably half of the general purpose tier. Again, your connectivity is going to be redirected automatic, and you can also use one of the secondaries as your read traffic. So you can reroute your read traffics to one of the secondaries and take some load off of your primary, and you are not paying any extra money for that. Of course, you are paying more because you are on Premium and Business Critical, but you can take advantage of that. So far, we have not deployed anything new, but this is how you can get a data center redundancy. So if we go back to the slide we talked about here. So with the solution that I just showed you, this is a data center redundancy, right? We talked about deployment and data center. So next we'll move to the zone, region, and geography. So now going to zone, now you have to do something. So far what we have talked about, we haven't touched anything. These are all built in. And this is within a region. Again, you have this availability zone. And as I said, each zone has its independent power, cooling, and network. So let's see how this works. So if you're in general purpose, just so you know, this is still in public preview, and this will cost you additional money. So if you turn this on in general purpose, you have to pay more money. How do they do it? As you can see in this picture, you have your zone 1, 2, and 3, and your traffic manager is at the top. So the traffic manager is going to do the work. You do not have to reroute your app. You do not have to change your connection string. This is all going to happen for you automatically behind the scene. This is disabled by default. So you turn it on. As I said before, this is only available for Gen 5 compute hardware. So this is important for you to know. If you want to deploy this solution, make sure you deploy your Azure SQL Database in the correct hardware. So again, your data and log file, you do not get copies. It is going to get detached and attached to your new compute, wherever in a different zone. And your data and log file also have zone redundancy. Now it's not local redundant anymore, because if the whole zone goes down and if you do not copy your data and log file to the other zone, then you kind of do not have the solution, right? So Microsoft will copy your data and log file continuously to a different zone, and your backup files, again, you get geographical redundant. So it's going to get copied to a different region. Now, if we move to premium and business critical, it's still disabled by default. But if you want to turn this on, you're not paying any extra money for this. This comes, whatever money you are paying for business and premium and business critical. Now, one thing happens here is you automatically get synchronous replication for all your nodes. So make sure your app can tolerate that, because now if you are submitting a query, by the time you get your acknowledgement back, the transaction has to get copied and hardened to your other secondary replicas. So you might get a higher response time, and make sure your app can tolerate that. You can test this, right? Before you go live, turn this on, turn it off, tell them, to see the difference, and can they tolerate that? Is it acceptable? If it is, then turn it on. If it is not, then you look at other solutions. You do not pay any extra. Yeah, otherwise, it's here your data and log files get, it's attached to your VM and continuously getting copied. So you do not have that problem with the detach and attach. So it's, again, a lot faster than the general purpose tier. This is another URL that I put. As you see, it's underlined. If you click that, it will take you to a Microsoft documentation. And it shows you, right? If you turn on the zone redundancy, your SLA gets better compared to a single zone, right? They haven't published for the general purpose yet, because it's in public preview. That's why you don't see a number. So again, you can go to there, read that, copy it, print it, and go and talk to the folks, right? What they want. Because if they're in general purpose and they want this, now you're talking about a little bit more money. So I'm going to take a pause here. If any question, put in the chat so we can talk about this, or discuss anything that you have before I move further. And I'm going a little bit faster because there's a lot of material. I want to at least get to some demos. So
I think we're good on the questions right now. So I'd say full speed ahead.
Thank you, David. Okay, I'll move on. So, this is probably the question, Chase, you asked, is there's Active Geo Application. This is what we are familiar, or we call on premises today, is always on availability group. It's the same technology, built in for Azure SQL databases. So as you see in this picture, I have a primary and I have a secondary, and they're in two different regions. Now we are talking about geography redundancy, right? And Microsoft has a recommended pair of region, right? If you're in East US 2, Microsoft recommend you put your secondary in Central US. Do you have to? No, you can do it in other region, but that's the recommendation from Microsoft. Probably, behind the scene, I do not know, I'm just guessing. Probably it works better the way the network and everything else is set up. So what happens here? Your data is continuously getting replicated to your secondary. But remember, this is not a synchronous replication, this is asynchronous. And you can have up to 4 secondaries. You can use your secondaries for your read-only traffic. Now, because it's asynchronous, you still have a possibility of losing data. And again, if you go back to some of the documentation that I've been talking about, it will tell you max how much data you can lose. Now, do not confuse with two different things. One is how much data you can lose, and one is how far behind you are. Why I say that? Because people sometimes confuse this. Your logs are continuously getting copied and getting hardened, but it doesn't guarantee you that your logs are getting replayed into your secondary right away. So you might lose your data 5 seconds, but if you query your secondary as a read-only, you might be seeing data older than 30 minutes. So what happened here? Those 29 minutes and 55 seconds data got hardened into the secondary, but haven't got replayed yet. So you're not going to lose those, but there is still, replaying and applying those. So that's why you're not seeing it, but you haven't lost that data. So try to keep that in mind and try to explain it when you discuss with people, because I see, oftentimes I'll get a service ticket to my team that, you guaranteed us that we're not going to be losing more than 5 seconds. Why I'm seeing the data older than 5 minutes, I'm expecting more, recent data. I'm like, okay, you're not losing data that's guaranteed. It's got hardened, but it haven't got replayed yet, right? So, and you probably want to test those before you go live and, set some expectation, but you cannot guarantee that because there is, no way, you don't have a direct control on that. And that's why Microsoft doesn't provide you a number on the replay of your logs. So they only give you a guaranteed time for the copy that you're not going to lose the data. So just keep that in mind. Now, if you have a transaction that's so critical that you definitely want it to get copied or hardened into your secondary before the caller get acknowledgement, look at this store procedure. I'm not going to talk about in details. Your developers can take advantage of it, and they can actually put this in the transaction, which will guarantee you a commit on a copy on the secondary before you get a commit. Let me look at the chat. Okay, so Tracy said thank you. So hopefully I answered Tracy's question. Now, auto failover groups. So take a pause and think about it. This solution that I just talked about, this is, if you look at here, my symbol is a database, a single database. If you think about in our on-premises, we call this always on availability group. What does that mean? We can put multiple databases in a group. Once we fail over the group, all those databases fail over and they're transactionally consistent. Now, when Azure SQL Database was first released, and Microsoft still prefer that, and that's why natively they do not support, cross joins and bunch of things, that a database should be content within itself, right? Your security and everything. Now, sometimes it's not practical. So people started, building app that you need more than one or more Azure SQL databases. Now that poses a problem if you have to fail over one by one database. Now you're not transitionally consistent anymore. So there is a demand that how can I fail over a bunch of Azure SQL database that are transactionally consistent? So that's why Microsoft came up with this idea or this concept of auto failover groups. Still, it's the same idea, same technology behind the scene, but now you can group bunch of databases within a group. As you see in this picture, now I have two databases on my primary and I have two on my secondary. I can fail over and they're being replicated. And you probably also see another thing that I have listener, which I did not have in this slide, right? I did not have any listener. So if I fail over, unless, now I'm, a little bit going to a different topic. Recently, in a couple of months before, Microsoft also came up with, I'm skipping the word, alias concept, right? So if you are not using alias, and a couple of months before we didn't have alias for Azure SQL Database, you literally have to, after your failover, you have to change your connection string. But now you have alias, so you don't have to do that. But over here, you don't have to worry about alias. You can still use it if you want to. You get this listeners as soon as you set up a failover group, and you can, if you use these listeners in your connection string, you do not have to do anything once you fail over. The aliases will point you to the right place. But also now you do not get some of this stuff that you get with the previous solution I just showed you. You can only have one secondary, where on the other one you could have four. You cannot have that. So keep that in mind. That's why it's important for you to know all this, for you to decide what you want. This is available in all tier except hyperscale. So I want to mention that, even though I'm not talking about hyperscale. So this is how your listeners look like. So it will have a failover group name, .database.windows.net. That will take you to your read write. If you use the one at the bottom, that will take you to your read-only traffic, which you can use to offload some of your read traffic from your primary. Now, there is a setting called grace period with data loss hours when you set up failover groups. And this setting, took me a while to really understand what this means and what this does for us. So, I worked with Dimitri, who works in the Azure SQL Database team at Microsoft, and a couple of his team members. We went back and forth, and I didn't want to lose that information. Normally, I don't promote my blog in this talk, but I really, documented all those conversations in a blog post. So go and read that. So pretty much, you have to use this parameter when you set up. It's mandatory, and the minimum is a 1 hour. What that tells you is, if something goes wrong, if you do not do anything, after 1 hour, they will fail you over. This is pretty much for shops, like a small shop. You really don't have an ops team. You're not monitoring things 24/7. This is a safety net for them. If you have a 24/7 team, you are monitoring your apps, or you have a business that's running 24/7. This is not probably a setting that you want to depend on, right? You still have to have this setting, but you can always go and fail over manually if you want to. For Microsoft to decide to fail over millions of customers to a different data center, they have to think twice before they do that. So go read that. If you have more questions, let me know. This is a table that I created just to give you some differences between geo application and auto failover groups. I'm not going to read this, but make sure you know this before you deploy. So we talked about a lot of replication. How do you know how far behind you are, where you are? So this is pretty much a copy paste from documentation. This is one of the DMVs that you can use that will tell you how far behind you are. You might get, don't use this when you are still syncing, right? Initial sync. Use this when you are done with sync, and it will tell you that if you go to your GUI or their PowerShell commands, I'll show you, it tells that you are still in the initial sync, right? Because that can confuse you some of the results. This is not a comprehensive checklist. You don't have to use it, but these are some of the questions that I take with me when I go, when people tell me that, okay, we have a new app, or we are moving from on-premises to totally cloud. We need to have discussions. We want to go Azure SQL Database, PaaS service. These are some of the questions that I go and quiz them on before I design the solutions. And I'm not saying you use this, but if you're new to this, I'm sure there are probably other ones you want to ask based on your, and if you have someone that you think I missed, let me know. I'll add it. Just to get it started, this might help you to get the discussion going. So these are a couple of the things that I'm going to demo. We have 20 minutes. I probably not prefer to come back to slides. So I rather, there are some resources that I put in. These are all URLs. You can go back and read more. This is if you want to take a snap to download slide and code. Don't do it now. I'm going to refresh the repo by end of today. So don't download. You will see a newer version of some of the slides and the demo code. So that's about it. So I'm going to take a pause and I'm setting up my demo. So if you want to ask me any questions, this will probably be a good time. Hopefully you can still see my screen.
Yep, screen looks good, and
Okay.
no additional questions right now. But if
Okay.
anybody has any, do not sit on them. Please put them in the chat window for us.
I talked a lot. I just want to, like I said, the concept I think is more important, and then the mechanics. I'm using something called Azure Data Studio. This is a very, very lightweight tool. I'm not going to go into details. If you just search Azure Data Studio, go to YouTube. There's smarter people than me, even Julie from Microsoft product team. Sorry, she's a product manager on this team. She has a bunch of, with Alan Yu and a couple of other team members, a bunch of YouTube videos they did and sessions copied on Azure Data Studio about notebooks, about extensions. So, phenomenal tool, go and look at it. I'm using notebooks in PowerShell kernel. There are many other kernels now available. And I'm more excited about the Kusto one that came out recently. It was very nice to, finally we can write native Kusto query language in Azure Data Studio. So, but that's a different topic anyway. Before all of you came online, I said, demo start here. I ran all this, as you can see my output. I ran all this morning, early morning around 6 a.m. because it takes a lot of time to set up stuff and we don't have time. So I did that. And this all has, enough documentation, enough comment that you should be able to run this. You just have to change, variable names if you don't like these names. There's a password file that I do not want to, show it. So I copy it from there. Put your subscription ID. I should probably change this type to also this run books. You can just run with a new parameter. If you click this, there are other buttons on the top. And then rest all should work. You have to change just this one place. Everywhere else in this notebook, I use variables, so you don't have to change it all over the place. So I set this up, all this up for you before, for us, before you came online. Now, what did I set up, right? I don't want to put you in dark. So as you can see here, I have 3 servers and 2 databases. That's all I have. And on my primary server, I just have 1 database. And I did not set up anything because I want to show you the built-in HADR capability. If you come here, if you go to replica, you do not see anything. I did not set up anything. If we go to failover groups, there's nothing, right? And just to prove my point one more time, if I go to my secondary, and I named this secondary just to be obvious, you can name it, there is no database. So I haven't set up anything yet. It just deployed those. And so let's look at the backups, right? So we talk about like long-term retention backups and all that. So right now on my primary, as you can see, I do not have any setup here. So by default, you do not get long-term retention backup. You have to set that up. So let's look at it in the GUI also. We looked it up in PowerShell. If we go to retention policy, sorry, I'm on the secondary. Should have been in the primary. Backups. And we go to retention policy. As you can see, I told you by default, you get 7 days. You have no weekly, monthly, or yearly. So I can click this here, and then I can say configure policy. And all of those I put PowerShell command. I'm not advocating do it from here, but I'm, just for the demo, it's easy to show here because it's visual. I can slide it up to 35 days. I can slide it back to any days I want, right? So you can do that. If you're in basic, you cannot. I can also set up my weekly here. I can say I want my weekly backups to keep for 10 weeks. I do not want any monthly. I want to keep my yearly backup for 5 years. But the question is, what's a yearly backup? Which week, right? Say like 19th week. And now I can hit apply. And now we'll see all these changes, right? Again, as I said, I have another example. You can set this up. If you want a 12-week, 5-year, 16th week, run this command and it will do this for you. So we set this up now. If you want to see this, what we did in the GUI, as you can see now, our weekly is 10 weeks, yearly 5-year, week of the year is 19, right? Sorry. And if you want to remove it, again, you have a command, if or you can do it from the portal too. So it's as simple as that with the backups. If you need more than 10 years, there's nothing built in. You can probably work with Microsoft on a case by case with them, if you really need that beyond 10 years. I talked about built-in HADR, and as I showed you, I didn't do anything. So I set this up for general purpose. And I also deployed a database in business critical tier. And so let's look at the business critical one. I'm not going to show you both because it's the same concept. There is a tool I'm going to use, OSTress, and I put a URL here. If you do not know what is OSTress, look it up. People use it for many reasons. I use it for, for any release. I'll, capture a workload. I'll run it before, deploy the code. I'll run it again and compare a lot of stuff. You can do many, many things. So I'm just going to, we don't have time to talk about this tool, but if you can look it up. So here, I'm just going to do a select count. This is my server name. This is my database name. And my username is going to prompt me for a password. And there are some switches I want to run this over and over. And then this is a command that you can initiate a failover. There is some limitation. I think you can run only once in every 15 minutes. You can test this, or once in every 30 minutes. So this is not something for you to force, to do a manual failover or anything. This is just for testing purpose that it's working. Microsoft does all this for you. So, this is, so I'm just going to keep that going. So now my app is working, right? As you can see, I'm doing the selects continuously. There's no error. Everybody's happy. And now I come here, I say invoke a failover. You see connection timeout, right? And I'm not doing anything. I'm not changing connection string, nothing. I'm sitting. And as you see, less than 10 seconds, I get reconnected again. So I'm just going to stop that. Okay. So any question here? And I have this code when you download, if you're testing with general purpose, same thing is just, I have deployed 2 different databases in 2 different tier. I also measured it, so it's a little bit more time because, I'm sending it from here. I'm sitting at my home, coming back to my terminal. So it took about 17 seconds, but as you saw from the demo, the real failover happened a lot quicker than that. So now I'm going to move to the next one. We'll set up Active Geo Application, right? So I'm going to do this from here, then we'll go to the portal and see it. So far we haven't done anything. We still have built-in. Now let's set up something. And now I'm setting it up to the secondary server. So if we go to the portal, and again, if you remember, I talked about Active Geo Application is part database. So if you're on here at a server pane, you don't see any options here. You really have to go to your database level. And now you see something called replicas. And I showed you before, we didn't have any replica. Now, as we see that we are seeding to the secondary, and this is 0%, right? So now it's doing the initial sync to a server that I had without any database in central US. Sorry. So once it is set up, then now we have redundancy at a zone level, right? Sorry, at a region level. And so if the whole East US2 goes down, we can fail over to central US. So let's go to that command and see, still is doing it. This is one of the things that I really do not enjoy when you do demo against cloud or Azure, that you do not have a precise control how long it takes, right? If you do it early morning, it's a little bit faster. This is a busy time. Everybody's at work, so probably I don't get the same bandwidth from my home. So it takes a little bit longer. Now, once that is done, once I've set up, the next command is you can do a planned failover. And you also have some of those options from here. You can do force failover and all that options. So it's taking a little bit longer than what I expected, but maybe a good time if yeah, I don't see any. Okay. Tracy has another question. Is there a timeline capture element? I should just bring it to the screen so people. Is a timeline capture element installed in case you need to roll back to an action you took in your primary DB, for example? Timeline capture element, I didn't understand that, but you can do point in time restore, as I showed you, from those backups from 7 days up to 35 days. You can go, you have commands in PowerShell. Also, you can use the portal. You can be very precise with your time. So I want to roll back to that date and time. Oftentimes, the request you will get from your application team is to restore it probably with a different name. They want to go and look at it first, right? If they're happy with it, you can always change the names and make it the name of your original, or they might want to extract some data and recreate another update or a delete statement to fix it, so not to lose the other transactions that happen from that point till the time they discover that something went wrong. Tracy, let me know if this did make sense or if this did not make sense. How precise the lookup. Thanks, boss. Many days screen grab. Yes. Okay. So I can definitely send you some screen grab from a point in time restore from portal. Also, I can send you a PowerShell command which has all these switches. So if you just send me a note, I would be more than happy to do that. So this is done. As you can see here, so we did the setup, right? And if we go here now, just take a note that the primary is in East to West, secondary is in Central. And I'm just going to do a failover now. And you will see that the roles are going to change. Now the Central US will become primary. And because East US is down, East US2 is not down, it will become a secondary automatic, and it will start flowing the data on the other way. See the primary now is a central use. I know the name can be deceiving because it says secondary server, because that's how I set it up initially. So the primary is in secondary, and the secondary is in East US2. And the secondary automatically got the readable role because it's second. You can still repoint your read traffic to East US2 right now. I'm just going to fail back. Now, failover group you can first create a failover group and do not do anything with database. It's just a shell, give it a name, create it. Then you can go and start adding databases. You can also remove databases from failover group anytime you want. Because we are doing this demo on after we did the Active Geo Application, so the initial sync is already done, but you do not have to do those. You can straight set up your failover group without doing what I did, and it will do the initial sync for you. So, and again, remember, the failover group is at a server level. So if we are at a database pane, under data management, you do not see anything named failover group, right? But if you go to the server, you see the failover group. And if we refresh it, now you see a failover group, and it says that I have one database, 0 of 1 means one database qualify to be in this failover group, but I do not have anything. At that, one of the parameters that I talked about of the grace period, I set it up to 120 minutes, means 2 hours. The minimum you can do it for is an hour. So now I'm adding the database into that failover group. So we only have 3 more minutes, and because it's a office hour, it's not an evening meeting. I'm not going to go beyond the hour, but again, you can download this and you can finish the other demos that I have. One other thing I also have is not related to this, is to show you that you automatically get your secondary for read-only traffic if you are deploying your Azure SQL Database into premium and business tier. So I have another notebook to prove that. You can run that at your leisure, but you just have to mention in your connection string that you are, this traffic is for read-only, and it will and there's a parameter and exact time that you have to use. So if we go here now, you see that it's added, right? And if we click this, you can see it here. You can add databases, you can remove database, failover, force failover, delete. You can do all this from here. You can also do those through PowerShell command. And the read write listener I was talking about, so once you create this, you want to copy this to send it to the team that set up your applications, tell them to use this to in their connection string. So now when you failover fail back, you do not have to change this. It will automatically point you to the server, and you can test this. When you run my demo, you take this, connect to this, and do a edit server name, do a failover, do edit server name. You'll see that the server names are going to change. So I'm going to stop here, and because we are just 1 minute left, and I really don't have much there. After this, we are pretty much to the end. This does, show you a couple of failover, groups, how to failover, fail back, and show that, and a demo for the read scale out. And I have a line to remove everything you created because, I get some subscription from Microsoft through my Visual Studio and through my MVP thing. So I want to use that money wisely. As you can see, I always monitor how much money I'm spending. So if you're new to this, always create a resource group and then create everything. So right now, after I'm done with this, I just have to go and say, delete this resource group. It's going to clear out everything. So I don't keep spending the money that I do not need to. So I can, stretch that money. So I have a one-line command to do that. This will clean everything else. So that's it. I'm going to stop talking. And if you want to hang out, I have time. Any question, comments, Tracy, if you want to, David is okay to keep the meeting open. I can show you the point in time restore. I can send you a couple of screenshots and some documentation from Microsoft, which will get you, running with that.
Of course, yeah, we'll definitely stay as long as we need. And for anybody watching this, this was recorded. It will be up on YouTube here really soon. If anybody has any additional questions, I'd say go for it. In the meantime, in 2 weeks, actually, Rick Lowe will be presenting for our group a session called, and it's kind of fun, Weird Stuff I Saw While Working with Multi-Sept and Availability Groups. So stay tuned. If you're watching this after the fact, Taiob has his contact info at the beginning of the recording here, and feel free to reach out to him with any questions you may have, because this stuff it gets deep really fast, and we have a lot of fun with this kind of stuff. So if there's no additional questions, Tayob, I'll actually let you do whatever you need to do to work with Tracy to get the those pieces laid out. And I will stop the recording now. And thank you for presenting. This was awesome. It's absolutely critical for anybody that's even remotely looking at the cloud. And I'll tell you right now, if you go and do DR on-prem, it's a whole lot harder than if you're already in the cloud. Not to say better or worse, easier, cheaper, et cetera. But this is one of those things that if your organization is even remotely interested in modernizing some of their data platform components, you have to know this. It's just another really good tool for the toolbox. So thank you all. I'll stop the recording now